This is Henry.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yes.
Yes, this is Bruce Hutchin, your host at Whitetail Rendezvous, sir.
How are you, Bruce?
Well, I'm doing good. 2 weeks ago, I'm going on 3 weeks, I had shoulder surgery, so it's kind of nixed my my fall hunting, my fall sojourn through the Midwest and hunting and talking, doing remote calls and everything like that.
What kind of shoulder surgery did you have?
I had a torn rotator cuff and a torn bicep.
Oh, that doesn't sound like any fun at all. I've been nursing a partially torn rotator cuff for a long time, and I plan to continue to nurse it because archery just means way too much to me to have several months of not shooting, you know?
Yeah. And if you can still shoot, I'm looking at your, I'm babbling here. You're shooting a compound. So traditional bow would be harder on it. So the compound, at least you do get 70% let off?
Yep. I've got 75 on my current bow. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and that helps a tremendous amount.
Yeah. Once you break over, then you're fine. I mean,
exactly.
But the only thing I would say, if you need to get it done, because it's it worse than my hip. In February, I had my hip replaced, which was a piece of cake compared to this.
I've heard that, yeah.
Just really a piece of cake.
So you're basically the bionic man now.
Well, I'm a right side. I'm a right side.
Good as new.
I'm worth over $250,000, they tell me.
That's great.
Well, yeah, it is great, but I literally lost, I lost Ohio, not Ohio. I lost Iowa, Kentucky, and Wisconsin this year.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and I had nice.
Well,
Go ahead.
There's no big deer out there anyway, so that's fine.
Yeah, right. We took off our farm. Wow. I started hunting whitetails 50 years ago. I am 70 years old, and I went to school in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and worked in worked a number of jobs anyway. But the bartender guy said, "Where are you going home for Thanksgiving, Hutch?" And I said, "I'm not. I'm staying here. I can't get from La Crosse, Wisconsin, to New York and back." And so he said, "Well, come home with me and we'll go deer hunting." I said, "Deer hunting? I know what a deer looks like. I read Field and Stream or whatever." And he said, No, we're really going to do that. So we had something called Oktoberfest in La Crosse. So I made an extra $100 that weekend and went and bought a shotgun, a pair of boots, a big Rudd coverall type thing, like a poncho, I guess. I don't know what you call it today, and some slugs. And that was it. And it's just the beginning of a journey that's taken me all over North America. I never hunted Africa, but I've hunted mostly all of North America. And anyway, this is our 50th anniversary, and we're going to have a party at the bunk. We have a place called the Bunkhouse that we all stay in. And they go, "You got to make it here." I said, "There's no way." So we'll have to do the celebration next year.
There you go. 51's just as good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a number.
It truly is just a number. And I can hear you fine. You can hear me fine. I've got 5 shows today, so we're going to move right along. What are the
Excellent.
3 things that you want to make sure that I ask you about in the show?
You know what? Scouting is my number one thing. I spend a tremendous amount of time scouting, and it's something that is absolutely vital to my success. 2, maybe some stalking techniques. And actually, I would say 3 would be stalking techniques, and 2 would be glassing, because that's how I find my deer. That's where my hunt starts. My hunt starts when I sit my butt down on the top of a mountain and get the binoculars out. That's when the hunt starts for me.
All right. Then I just spent all of August archery hunting for a sheep in Colorado. And I had some
Oh,
great
awesome. What area did you draw?
S12, and I did not kill a sheep. A lot of reasons for that. I'll send you my Department of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, my hunt report I sent to him. But there were a lot of reasons. There were a lot of reasons why I didn't. I never got close enough. I saw a lot of sheep. I saw a tremendous amount of sheep, but it was just a lot of different things came in the thing. But here's the best part is that I found 2 Pope and Young, probably Boone and Crockett, Shearer's moose. I had found 5 200 plus alpine bucks. I found 1 buck. He was over 13,000 feet. I was going, what an elk. What is he doing way up here? He said, then I looked, I go, that's not an elk. I went, holy fright. So there I am at a scrambling to get my tripod out, scrambling to do that, scrambling to get my phone scope up, scrambling, and I didn't do it. I didn't get it done. But
I've been there, man.
Unbelievable. I mean, I pick a number, but he was backlit, and I get all that. But he had the width and the height and the deep forks. He even had brow tine.
The fact is, a big one when you see it. I mean, you can sit there and say 180, 190, 210 all day long, but the fact is,
he was big.
At the end of the day, a giant when you see it. They stand out,
Yeah, a giant. But, and we're going to talk about that because, all my listeners, I was trying to get my stats this morning. I'm pretty sure I'm over 90,000 downloads for my show. So that's kind of fun.
That's awesome.
For a guy that doesn't know what he's doing.
Hey, it's all on the job training for every single one of us. I mean,
right.
I learn something new every single time I step in the woods. You think you got it figured out. You go out there and all of a sudden you pull the okey doke on you and it tells you right off the bat, you don't know a thing.
Yeah. How do you want me to introduce you, Henry?
You know what? I'll leave it up to you. I'm just guy who works for a living, hunts as often as he can. And, I'm an archer, I'm a bow hunter, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and it keeps a pretty full schedule.
Yeah. And I read your blog spot and about the kids, running and different things on that. So I get some background, about you and your family. So that was good. All right.
Cool.
I'm going to take a drink of tea. You got coffee or anything there?
I've got a drink right here in front of me. Yep.
All right. So here's how it goes. I knock it down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to do the introduction, and then we'll go and we'll start talking about. And I'll set it up. Let's say, hey folks, a lot of you have written into Whitetail Rendezvous at gmail.com saying, hey, I want to hunt out west. I really want to, get one of those monster mule deer, and so I found a guy right here in Colorado, not too far from me, and he agreed to be on the show. So we're going to talk about how to transfer the skills you're using now in the Midwest to the far west, to the alpine muleys. And we're going to talk about mule deer that you can see long distance and blah, 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 blah. And then we'll go from there. And then about 5 or 10 minutes, I'll say, if somebody wants to get hold of you, Henry, how do they do that? You say, hey, go to my Facebook page, blah, blah, blah. And then we'll grind through. We'll have fun with the show until about the last minute or so. And I'll say, Henry, we're coming up in the soft stop of the show. Please give shout outs to whomever you wish to. And then you can say, hey, my wife and Kyle and, whoever you shoot for, pro staff, blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
blah.
cool.
Do all that. And then we'll just wrap the show. And then after you say thank you, then I'll click the show off and make sure recording, because it has happened to me that I've done a whole show and it hasn't recorded for whatever reason, technology. And if that happens, we'll just have to reschedule because I don't have everything's working now. So I don't have any control of that. Wish I did, but I don't.
No problem at all.
So
no problem. I understand completely.
I am going to turn off my cell phone. Yeah, and I have 5 shows today, so it's going to be an interesting day. That's like
awesome. So how quickly do you normally get them up?
Well, right now, because it's hunting season, and I have my shoulder surgery, I'm turning around the next week. You'll be up next week for sure.
Cool.
And then
awesome.
I've got 5 shows today, so I'll pick the best shows. I've got 2 more shows to post for this week, Thursday and Friday, and then I'll kick in the rest to begin next week. And then Thursday I've got 2 more shows, so I'm already done for next week. And I like to stay a week ahead. That's what I like to do. But it's fun. It really is. It's a fun thing. So let's knock it down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, folks, and we're going to head out west today. Yes, we're going to head out to Colorado. We're going to talk about hunting mule deer with a bow, and we're going to talk about it with Henry Ferguson. Henry knows this stuff, and he's going to get into some really good tips, techniques, what you have to do to transfer what you're already doing as a good whitetail hunter into becoming a student, let's just put it that way, of high country mule deer. Henry, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Bruce. Glad you could have me here.
Now, how long have you been hunting out west here?
Well, I mean, really, I started hunting as a kid, and went out on like everybody's story, went out on a hunt with my dad. Just happened to be a mule deer hunt, and we happened to have a little success. And I was a pretty young kid, and it's made a pretty big impact on me. And, as I grew up, my dad passed away when I was 12. So we didn't have a lot of hunts together, but it gave me that foundation and gave me something I wanted to do. Knew that was something I wanted to do in my life. So through my teen years and stuff, I got lucky and drew a tag in Arizona and shot an enormous spike buck in a low density unit, to say the least. I mean, when I say enormous, I mean that thing barely fits in a Ziploc sandwich bag, barely, just enormous spikes. But he was literally the only buck I saw the whole season. And it was a hard earned hunt. And that was kind of laid the groundwork for the rest of the hunts I've ever been on in my life, because they just don't come easy,
They sure don't. And one thing I noticed, you compete in a lot of archery tournaments. How does that help you become a better hunter?
Oh man, that's a great question, Bruce. I'll tell you, it helps you learn how to steady yourself and how to take control of a situation. So if I'm in a tournament and I know that I'm shooting a good round and I know that I've got to stay plugged in every single shot. And I know that when you get closer to the end of a really good round, man, those shots get harder and harder and harder, because your nerves are going, you're sitting there thinking it through too much. And you're going, okay, man, if I shoot another 12 on this target, this is going to be one of the best rounds of my life. And so you start kind of outthinking yourself. And as you're doing that, they're the exact same nerves that you feel when there's a big buck out in front of you. You've spent all day sneaking in on this buck, and maybe you've sat there for 3 hours waiting for him to stand up. And when he finally stands up, man, all of that comes rushing, all of that experience comes rushing forward. And I mean, you can sit there, and even though you're nervous, you can very clearly and easily reason with yourself and say, hey, I've done this before. I've made this shot before, because there's not a shot I take hunting that I haven't made either in practice or at a tournament. So just having that experience and having that confidence that you can deliver in crunch time is just vital, in my opinion.
Listeners, I want to just throw something at you. He mentioned sitting on a buck that he can see, probably maybe 30 yards away, maybe 60. We'll talk. Henry, what's your max distance shooting?
Oh man, Bruce, come on now. That's painting the guy into a corner here. Out west, I mean, it's not, we don't sit a trail. So these bucks come in where they're going to come in. I've snuck in and I've sat on them at 100 yards, and I've sat on them at this year I literally sat on a buck that was so close I could have spit at him, and he was right under me on a cliff edge, and I literally drew back on this buck 6 times, and I could not convince myself that I could get my arrow to clear the cliff edge. So I drew back and let down 6 times, waiting for that buck to stand up and move just enough away from the cliff edge that I could get a shot. So I say prepare for everything, and that way you'll never be surprised.
Yeah, and what I tell people, know your max distance. Now, I was
absolutely
in the field with a sheep hunter who did get a sheep. Jeremy got a gorgeous ram, and he was practicing. I mean, dead on 10 spot, whatever you want to call it, out to 100 yards with his compound. But he had practiced the whole year. As soon as he got the ticket, he was practicing the whole year. So distances out west, listeners, can kind of fake you out. But if you do decide to come out west, especially where you're going to be hunting high alpine, not a lot of timber, then you've got to know your max distance, and you got to have a rangefinder, because unless you spend a lot of time out here, it'll fake you out so bad. But the biggest thing is finding the deer, then sitting on it. And that's no different than sitting in a tree stand with a buck right underneath you within your shooting parameters for 3 hours. That takes a lot of juice, and that's why it's exciting to do it. Henry, your thoughts on that?
That's got to be really, really similar. And I'll tell you, it's moments like that when you learn what cottonmouth really is. When you're sitting there and you know that literally at any second that can happen. That buck can be up or say he's bedded under a tree. You're in your tree stand. He's bedded under a tree 20 yards away, but you don't have a shot angle at him. You've got to wait. And it's the same. It's got to be the same experience. I mean, you're standing there waiting, just totally prepared. It's the moment becomes pretty big. It really does. It becomes pretty significant, and you know what's riding on it, and you know that at any second, man, it can go to a flurry of activity. And it's pretty nerve-wracking, to be real honest with you.
Now, I've alluded to alpine hunting. It's most of your hunting done at tree line or above?
Oh, no. I've shot a couple up there. Honestly, a lot of my hunts happen. I've done some low country stuff in the past. I've done, most of my bucks though have come around 8,000 feet in that neighborhood.
Okay, so they're in.
So I tend to hunt kind of that mid-level stuff.
Now, so there's thick patches. There's some, oak brush. There's some dark timber. There's some outcrops. There's some, open parks, mini parks. Avalanche chutes. Are all those type of environments that you're hunting in?
Those are all things I'm looking for. What I'm looking for, Bruce, my main thing, my skill that I've developed the best over the years, aside from, working my butt off on my shooting, is glassing. And that is the key to consistent success out west, is learning how to use your optics. Now, I know you're going to, a lot of the people will sit there and tell you, hey, if it's not German made, don't even bother. The fact is, that's not realistic for a lot of us. I have a pair of Swarovski binoculars, but I inherited those. So, it's not like I went out and dropped the $1,200 on them myself. The best thing you can do is learn how to use whatever you do have. I'm of the opinion that if you put those binoculars on a tripod, and every binocular out there, you can find a way to mount it to a tripod, whether they have an actual post for it that you can buy aftermarket, or just simply buying an aftermarket plate that you can strap them down to. When you get those binoculars stationary, and when you're panning through your field of view over a mountainside, when they're stationary, you are adding significant value to your binoculars. So my opinion has always been this: if you've got $500 binoculars, say you have some nice Vortex or Nikons, put those suckers on a tripod, those things instantly become as good as $1,000 binoculars. It's how you use it more than anything.
And folks, I hope you're taking notes on that, because there's a wide variety. Vortex, I work with me during my sheep hunt. They got great glass. I do have Swarovskis that I got a long time ago. Still work as good as today. And what I found is exactly what Henry said, in talking to literally hundreds of people before I went sheep hunting. And they said optics will make or break your hunt. Now, in the whitetail community, Henry, we've been talking about long distance scouting, because everything in whitetail country, especially where I hunt in Wisconsin, isn't flat. Fortunately, we have hills, and we can sit a quarter mile away, a half a mile away, and I can watch right where my stand is. I can watch that whole field. And sometimes I can watch, once the leaves come down, I can watch the ridges, and I sit and I glass. I don't even get into the woods. I just glass, especially in the morning when the sun's at my back. Then I'm glassing these ridges, and I can say, oh, there's one moving there, and there's one moving there. And I note the time and the travel, if they're going left or right or up or down. And
there you have it. That's awesome. You're applying a Western technique to Eastern hunts. And I mean, that's a technique that can translate. And I'll tell you what, once I really disciplined myself to sit down and not move until I'd found what I was looking for, that's when my success started coming. I mean, it's absolutely crucial. Long range reconnaissance is what it's all about, in my opinion.
And everybody can't do that. I know you get some in the deep thickets and some of the swamps and some of the bottomlands. But even the bottomlands, or where the creeks are going through, just the bottomlands, you can hunt, but you have to hunt it maybe from a mile away. And people are going a mile away, with optics, especially with a spot scope. On a window frame, window mount, you can sit in your car, you're warm, and you're looking right down. You can look right down that river, and anything moves, you're going to see it. I guarantee it.
Absolutely.
You're going to see it. That's
the absolute truth. And even with a good pair of binoculars on a tripod, you can see it. It's amazing. People, if I had to choose whether, I'd put my money into a good pair of binoculars or a good spotting scope, I'll take the binoculars every time, simply because I do 90% of my spotting of animals through binoculars. And I mean, that's what's around my neck all day. That's what I use them for hunting. I use them for shooting at the range. I use them for archery tournaments. My binoculars are used almost on a daily basis. And that's, that means that's why I would put my emphasis there, because again, if you're a mile away, you can spot movement. And if you're spotting movement, then you can zoom, you can focus in on it, and you'll be able to tell if you're looking at a good buck from a mile away with a decent set of binoculars especially if they're on a tripod.
Here's one thing, and we talked about this in the warm up, Henry. A mile away, and I shared this with Henry. I was about 10,000 feet and about 13,000 feet up on a ridge, backlit with the sun going down. I saw this huge elk. Wrong. It was the biggest mule deer I've ever seen, and he was just huge. Unfortunately, I couldn't get my phone scope up on him, but I had him in my binoculars. I'm going, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And Henry, what did you say about that?
Oh man, I've been there. The funny thing is, whether you're looking at a 180 inch buck or you're looking at a 220 inch buck, the fact is you will know a giant deer when you see it. I mean, a lot of us get really hung up on score, and hey, I'm as guilty as the rest of them. That's, I sit there and do my scouting throughout the year, and I'll spend hours looking at, if I'm on a plane flying somewhere, I am literally looking on my phone the whole time at pictures and trying to field judge these bucks. But at the end of the day, you got to know what you're going to be happy with, and what a big buck looks like. You look at enough deer, that big one, when it steps around the corner, you know what it is. You know it's a giant.
And that's the same thing in the whitetail world. And Facebook is just a live. You go to Instagram, you go to any social media. I mean, some big bucks are going down. There's no question about it. Our farm, opening weekend in September, Garrett Shear took a 180 gross buck off the farm. We never have killed a 180. That's the first one. And there's more there because of
That's awesome.
Good management and everything. But I had Garrett on the show, he and his dad on the show, and I said, well, Garrett, how were you able to do that? Because we don't see that size of deer. He says, I've killed enough deer and with my bow, and I knew I had the great setup, and I just did the deal. But there was no question. He says, he dwarfed. There were a couple of 150s with him, and he said he just dwarfed it, and you just go, oh my goodness. I mean, that's what it really is. If you see enough critters, you just go, you take a deep breath and go, holy smokes. They just shout at you. They really do. They just shout at you.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. There's just sometimes it's literally just the demeanor of the buck that makes them stand out so much, and that's, big bucks just behave differently. We had a buck here that we chased for a couple of years that I called Shrek, because the first time I saw this buck, he was bedded down at the base of some oak brush. And, I was watching him from maybe a mile and a half away through the spotter. And, it was getting towards late afternoon, so he should be getting up any time now. And this little forky walks up around the oak brush and is sitting there jumping all around him. And he, trying to get him to stand up. And finally when he stood up, I've never seen anything like it. This big buck took his front hoof and smacked the smaller buck in the head. I mean, he wasn't done resting. He was, he had his own demeanor and his own way of doing things. And it was just funny because every time I saw that buck, he was the last one up. These bucks hang out in big bachelor groups during the summer. It's not real uncommon for us to see 15 deer, but when you look at them from a couple miles away, you can tell which one's the big one just simply because of their demeanor. They just have a different way of moving and a different, more mature aspect about them that is hard to put your finger on.
Let's segue. That's a good segue because you mentioned the summer and bachelor groups, and that rolls us right into scouting. And just like with any hunting through the years, I found the more I get beforehand intel or information about where they are, what class of deer are there, everything that I can gather even way before the hunt helps me prep and build my hit list. Now, listeners, I know every single one of you out there have your hit list for your deer, and you got them 1 through 5, 1 through 10. You got them. So you're doing exactly the same thing with the trail cameras and all the other. But Henry, talk to us about scouting for big bucks out west.
Well, I'll tell you, this is where my family is really needs a lot of credit because I spend a lot of time scouting. Me getting up at, depending on the area that I'm hunting, depending on where I'm drawing a tag that year, it's anywhere from a 2 to 4 hour drive out there. So, that means you've got to be up during the summer. That sun's up awfully early out here. And that means we've got to be up awfully early to get out there to beat the sun. So, I'll get up during the week. It's on average, I would say twice a week. And that gives me the ability to get out there, get in a morning of glassing and finding out who's living in that area, what kind of potential's coming. And most people really start that in July. I'm a little impatient, so I tend to start shortly after, we'll go out and do some shed hunting and look for sheds to see what's made it through. And, then we'll give them a month or so. And that's, generally my son's lacrosse season, a month or two. You know, generally June, we start looking again. We start looking to see how those antlers are developing and what's coming in. And July, we start aggressively scouting, and that's when I'll start getting out there twice a week or so. And then in August, I'll ramp that up maybe 3 times a week if, you know, as my schedule will allow. And it's just vital. You have to know what's out there. Now, I know that this is a luxury for me living in Colorado and hunting in Colorado. It gives me the ability to, you know, to be able to put the boots on the ground and put the glasses up to my eyes and know what's out there. But not everybody has that luxury. I'm getting ready. I'm leaving Thursday. I'm heading out to Utah for a hunt that I have scouted 0 days for. That's 0 days of actually boots on the ground, but I know the area a little bit, and I've got a lot of friends who have helped me out and kind of pointing me in the right direction, giving me a little guidance, so I'm not going in totally blind. But
what range are you hunting over there?
This will be on the Wasatch, that late extended season out that they have out there, just right outside of Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I'll give a plug. And it's for GoHunt.com, Insider, and Chris Porter and Brady there. My friend Dave Loescher used to work with them, and I write for them. And so just check out GoHunt.com and put in for Utah, then the Wasatch Range. You might be able to get some intel that you otherwise might not have. So I'll give a plug for
That's true. That's a great resource. They have a ton of information on there. I got a sneak peek at that. I looked at a friend's account this year, and that's something that I will be investing in this next year. There's just so much information on there, so much data. It can help you with, you know, draw strategies and, you know, and then once you do find the tag, and once you do get the tag, it can kind of give you a good starting point for where the herds live and some migration routes and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. So get in touch with me, because I did a big portion of Colorado, quite a bit in Wyoming, Montana. Those are the states that I wrote for them. So if I can help you.
Oh, that's great.
If I can help you in the future, there's a shout out for GoHunt.com. Let's talk about stalking. We've hit upon scouting. We've hit upon the importance of glassing and optics. And then, so let's talk about the stalk. Okay. We're 2 ridges away. We're a mile. The sun's at our back. We know that that's the buck we want to target today or this week. So how do we get up on them, and how much competition do I have? Let's talk about, am I the only cowboy in this unit, or is somebody else there? Let's talk about that.
Well, quite often you're not. And next week, that's a great point. Next week, I will be hunting a heavily hunted area. I expect I will not be the only rooster in the hen house. You know, I expect that there's going to be deer that I spot. And as I'm putting together my stock, you know, in my mind, getting my pictures of the terrain on my phone and, you know, making my notes, that the next time I look at it, I'm going to see somebody in camo 50 yards away from it, breaking my heart, you know. But that's part of public land hunting, and that's just one of the uncontrollables, you know. So I try to, step one is trying to get a little bit away from the people. It doesn't always mean going in farther. I know backpacking and all this backcountry hunting is a real popular thing right now, but truthfully, it's not always required. I mean, it's been romanticized a lot, but you don't have to be 8 miles from your truck to have a fun hunt, you know. And that's, but hey, everybody experiences the hunt in different ways, you know. That's just not, but it's not necessary. So what I will do though is also, once I spot that buck, you know, I just mentioned taking pictures. Everybody's got their phone with them all the time. I mean, it's, even if the places I hunt seldom have cell coverage, my phone's always with me. And so I will take a picture. I'll take a few different pictures. I'll take a wide angle shot, and I will literally hold the phone in one hand, and I will point with my pointer finger on my other hand at where the deer is bedded. So I'll do that in a couple of shots. Like I said, a wide angle shot, a close angle shot. So it gives me a little bit better reference, because no matter how many landmarks you pick out, man, it always looks different once you get over there. And I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, Bruce. You plan it all out. You think you have everything in place, and then you find yourself 100 yards from the buck, and you're like, okay, now which tree was he bedded under? Which rock was it? And it can drive you crazy. But if you can just pull your phone out and look back, reference back to that picture, man, that's a huge help. And you mentioned phone scope earlier too. My phone scope is always in my pack. So I will take close-up shots, and then I'll take the shots without the phone scope, just with my phone itself. So that gives us a good reference point, because no matter how careful you are and how stealthy you are, if you get over there and you can't find the stinking buck, it's just a nice walk in the woods. So, but once you start getting close, there's different schools of thought on how to get in quietly. These mule deer, they're called mule deer for a good reason. They've got those giant radar-like ears out on each side of their head. And I'm telling you, they can hear everything. I've snuck in on bucks, and I know the wind's blowing straight in my face. I know they can't see me. Boom, they stand up and run off. And, you're being as quiet as you can be, but I tend to hunt early season. Things are generally pretty dry, and it's not always easy at all to get in there quietly. So that's a big challenge. And what I tend to do, I will carry an extra pair of big, thick, heavy socks. I'll go to Walmart or Costco before the season and buy like a 10-pack of their cheap hiking socks, or the thick, darker colored gym socks, and I'll slip those on over my existing hunting socks. I'll hang my boots in a tree where they're visible. There's about 100 good stories as to why I do that now.
I'm laughing.
But let me just say,
I've been there. I'm laughing.
Bruce, you're understanding me perfectly. And here's the deal, guys. If you don't do this, you can spend hours hiking around in your stinking socks looking for your boots that you left in a perfectly visible spot. I will leave them on top of a rock, hanging from a tree where I cannot miss them. But I've gone so far now as to mark them on my GPS. But anyway, once you're in that once you're kind of in that close range, of 200 yards, and sometimes even at 400 yards, my boots will come off, and it does two things. Number one, it quiets your footfalls, and number two, it slows you down, because walking in your socks, I don't care how tough your feet are, it hurts. It just does. It hurts. And, you're stepping on sharp sticks, or you'll find out exactly how many cactuses there are in the area, because you'll step on all of them. So, but it makes you very aware and slows you down and helps you to be more patient in your stock. And that's just absolutely vital. They can't hear you. They can't see you. They can't smell you. You beat those three senses. You're getting close.
Yeah. You're coming, from the top down though. Is that correct?
Boy, I sure try to, just because that's where by the time you spot something in the morning, you've got to wait for the thermals to switch. So that's those wind currents. Once, you've learned this as a kid, heat rises. And as heat rises, that's where the wind starts going. It starts blowing up the hill. So you need to make sure you're, more than anything, you just need to make sure the wind's in your face. If not in your face, then blowing mostly in your face. It's, that's just one of those things that you cannot compromise. You cannot take a chance that they can smell you, because there's not many things that they believe more than their nose. And, if they smell you, it's over. It's done. They're not, that people have the image of a big mule deer that runs off 100 yards and stops and looks back at you. And yeah, that's, I've seen that in forkies. I've seen that in small 3 points. I don't see big bucks do that. And maybe I'm just hunting harder hunted areas than most, but I just don't have that experience with these deer.
Yeah, agreed on that.
That's kind of my stalking technique.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, wind. Everybody in whitetail land, gazillion dollars are spent on carbon, impregnated clothing, and all sorts of wind aids, and in the Midwest, I don't care where you are, your scent will destroy you. If you get the wind wrong, then it's really bad. Even during a rut. I mean, yeah. Even during a rut it is.
Oh, yeah.
So kind of recapping, we talked about glassing and that, folks, if you're doing long distance glassing in the Midwest, it's the same thing. The trees and the rocks just look different and the hills are bigger. And scouting, we do exactly the same thing, but we do it in 40 acres, 100 acres, 500 acres, 1,000 acres, if you're so lucky. But you're still scouting because we're scouting as whitetail hunters 365 days a year because we don't have to drive 2 to 4 hours just to get to where we want to start hunting or looking for bucks. We walk out the backyard and we're scouting because we're so familiar with it. So that's something that when you come out west, go to people like Go Hunt, Eastern's Magazine. There's a gazillion resources, a gazillion groups and forums that you can go and people will help you. 99.9 of the people will help you. Just like Henry, I asked Henry to get on the show just to give some insights because to whitetail hunters because hunting majestic, mature, we're talking mature bucks. Above 8,000 feet and higher is unbelievable. We didn't talk about hunting them out in the prairie. They get them in Kansas and such places like that. And that can be another show. But when you're in the mountains, you got to think and then you got to put your butt down and glass. You'd be surprised if you stay in one place, keep the sun at your back so you get good light and sit there all morning till the sun goes on top and starts coming in your face, you will not believe what you will see. Henry, your thoughts?
That's the absolute truth. And I'll tell you what, one of my favorite tips that somebody gave me years ago, and I can't remember who this was, but when it comes to how fast to move your binoculars through a field of view there and, over a mountain range, you want to be able to see the birds flying. If I'm seeing birds flying in and out of my field of view out there where I'm looking, whether it's 800 yards away or 2 miles away, that tells me I'm going slow enough. That tells me that because what you're looking for, you're not always looking for a deer. Sometimes you're looking for an ear to flick or something. My favorite story was actually about my biggest buck that I shot back in 2013, and this is a big story, and it's kind of a nice Western hunting adventure. So basically I was out hunting with a buddy of mine, Tim Lang, and we hunt together a lot. We know this area real well. And we know that the bucks get up generally between noon and 3 o'clock every day and shift their beds and they'll feed for a little bit. They'll bed back down and then they don't get back up for the most part until after dark. So we'll hunt early mornings and then we'll hunt again that early afternoon. And if we're lucky enough to spot something moving that early afternoon, then we can be on something. And sometimes it doesn't come together till dark. But this particular case, we're walking along this ridge line. I looked over into these rocks where bucks tend to bed, and I spotted what looked like a deer leg sticking out from under a rock, from like behind a rock. And so sure, I looked at it a little closer, and I was pretty sure it was, and it was about 500 yards away. So I got my pack off, got my spotter out, looked at it, and sure enough, I confirmed it was a deer leg. Well, watch that deer leg for about 30 seconds, and then I saw a shadow of an antler. And oh my gosh, this antler, I mean, you could just see the shadow of these huge forks, and it's what every hunter dreams of, And so after a few more seconds, this buck stands up and walks around and beds on the other side of the rock, on our side of the rock. Now we can see him in all his glory. And I mean, we're looking at him going, holy cow. And my goal for this hunt was 180 or better buck. And it took all of about 2 seconds of looking at this buck. Once again, you know a big buck when you see it, to know that that was exactly what I was looking at. So I immediately went into planning the stock mode. And so I got down there, I closed the distance pretty quick, got in this wash where he couldn't see me. Wind was blowing in my face, and knew that, I had 2 of his 3 senses beat as long as I could keep my steps quiet. Well, took my boots off at about 300 yards, left those, in a highly visible tree so I could find them again later. And was able to just kind of trot in there. I mean, he had a nice ridge line between us that he could not see me at all. So I came up on my first little spot where I knew I was going to be able to get a shot at this buck bedded over there, and got up to that little stunted pine tree, snuck up behind there and hit him with my rangefinder. I thought, man, he looks like he's still quite a ways out there. And this just shows you, I mean, it's big country, and things aren't always as close as they appear to be. And this one was quite a bit farther. He was 150 yards away, and I'm like, okay, that's too much. So I backed out, got back down to the bottom of the hill, and I'm like, okay, new plan. So I snuck back around this little ridge that had been concealing my approach, and went down, and I'm like, okay, the wind is angled across here, and it's not 100% in my face, but it's mostly in my face. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get down here, and I'll come back out at the end of this ridge, and then I'll have a shot at him. So I came out at the end of the ridge, and now I'm at 130 yards. Well, I'm 20 yards closer, but I'm still not as close as I want to be. So I said, all right, the only way to get from me to him is just a flat belly crawl. So I got down on my hands and knees and was crawling down through there. And there's just little tiny pine trees down there. And it was it's an old burned out area. So this is the new growth, the regrowth pine trees. And so just kind of crawling through there, finding all the raspberry bushes, which, man, those taste great, but they're covered in thorns. So, your hands are hurting, your knees are hurting, but I was able to finally, it took me an hour, almost an hour and a half to cover the distance from 130 yards to 80 yards, to 79.2 yards. It took it almost an hour and a half. So 50 yards in an hour and a half. That tells you how slowly I was moving. But once I got in there, the waiting game started. I mean, I sat there I did sit for, I think it was about 45 minutes waiting for this buck to stand, and, sitting there doing my best impression of a stunted pine tree in my camo. And, but he finally stood, and I got my shot. He's the biggest buck I've ever shot. He grossed just under 191, as an official gross score, and ended up netting 189 and 2/8. So missed all time Boone and Crockett by 3/4 of a stinking inch. But it was an amazing, it just kind of typifies the type of hunting that we do, and it's, sometimes it takes a lot more patience than you would think.
Henry, you got about a minute to give shout outs, and then we'll call the show. So give some shout outs to your hunting buddies, Stacy or Kyle, or whoever's helped you along the way.
Oh man, my wife, Stacy, is literally the most patient woman I know. She lets me go out and play with the animals all the time, and spends a lot of time taking care of things at home. And I travel a lot for work too. So she's amazing. She keeps the home steady and stationary, and everything's good. My son Kyle, he's 10. He just finally got to see his first animal go down this year. He's been on tons and tons of hunts with me for antelope and deer and everything like that. I hunt with some awesome guys, the Lang brothers, Tim and Brad, their brother-in-law Stan. Then Mike Neal's been a buddy of mine that we've taken a few deer together the last couple of years. And a couple of the companies that sponsor me that I've got a lot of belief in their products. Gold tip arrows, I've shot them for 16 years. Badlands packs, never used anything else. Don't need to. They're awesome. Unconditional lifetime guarantees. Grim Reaper broadheads, and I've shot those for about the last 6 years. And then Dark Energy. It's a new company that makes a personal charging device called a Poseidon that I've always got in my backpack, whether I'm working or hunting. I mean, it's a great device to have when you need to recharge your phone or your iPad or whatever you happen to need to recharge.
Henry Ferguson, thank you so much for taking us out west and sharing some insights that my folks out here in the Midwest and whitetail hunters across North America can say, hey, I need to do that. And folks, yes, you do. And somebody told me a long time ago, Garth Carter, who started Hunter Fu, apply, because it takes time in some of these places, and especially the good areas, to draw a tag, but it's well worth it. And you've got a lot of people to help you if you ever want to make the move to hunt majestic mule deer out west. So Henry, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much for your time, Bruce. Appreciate it. Good luck this year.